Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, olúwa mi ò dìde ojó ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀.
Server, that's what I'm looking for. Still looking for.
That kind of brings me in a roundabout way to one of the questions we were going to kind of get into, which I guess also as a dev post, or I forget exactly how it's worded, a forum post for a dev discussion, which is about multiboxing. That is what I was doing with that request. Obviously, I do not have the guild I had 20 years ago, so set up, basically a 3-character multiboxing setup. Had fun. That has been a question that kind of came about more so, I think, on the live stream that he did. There was a question about multiboxing. I have the specific, will it be allowed and is it considered pay to win? Which I guess is 2 sort of different questions. The answer was basically yes, I think, right? Yes, but with restrictions.
It's probably something that there is no definitive concrete answer he can actually give at this time, but for the scope of what he could say during the Q&A is that they're thinking about making it that you can multi-box if you're doing original inputs on each box, that you're not duplicating inputs from one to another or using automation of some other kind. So that's kind of like the fair version, and it makes it really tedious. And I would hope that it's so tedious that the amount of attention required to play each character is such that you're just not going to be able to multi-box like that. But then, of course, there's the actual detection side of thing and the security side of things, and making sure that that somebody's interactions appear genuine. They don't just have a bot that's programmed to have delays and do stupid things every once in a while to seem like a regular player, maybe even say something in chat every now and then. So it's there's a lot to it. There's a lot of technical stuff. There's a lot of the legal stuff. There's a lot of the design decision. I would ask this though, instead of talking about the hypotheticals, let's say they had perfect technical, let me give you this hypothetical, I guess is a better way to put it. If they had the perfect ability to execute it exactly how they wanted to, no matter what that way was, do you think that they would allow it or should allow it? If they could put whatever limits and constraints and all governments and entities in the world would back them up or something.
I don't see... restrictions are fine. The pay to win question, I don't understand necessarily.
I think the pay to win might have to do with if you're doing multiple accounts.
Well, but see, it's an account. I guess the question for me comes down more so to: are you running, 2 computers, 2 sets of keyboards, 2 mice, or are you running, basically just a program to send keys to different, to the different end clients that you're running? I can see that as probably more problematic. Things can get really out of control. I guess I personally don't see a problem with dual boxing or even sometimes having 3 characters. So I think that decision's fine. You do have examples of where it is a problem. EverQuest specifically, when they started going back through their legacy servers, basically, the nostalgia piece servers. There's a specific program for it, and I'm forgetting the name. That's been around forever. Now it's used in other games too. I think World of Warcraft. Basically, almost all games you can somehow set it up. But what you were running into with that game was you would have one person running 6 different mage characters at once. And the complaint, which I think was a legitimate complaint, was you had, then you'd have maybe 5 people with 6 different characters, so a 30 raid group, all being controlled by 5 people. Super easy to do because of the technology and programs available. That was a problem, right? That starts to so that starts to be a problem for everyone else, because that's making everyone else's gameplay terrible. They're not getting to do certain things. It's a game that doesn't have instances. It's overworld. If you have to get to the monster first, you don't have an instant sort of setting. So when you have these just hordes of characters being controlled by 4 or 5 people, I think that's a problem. That I can see as balancing, causing balance problems with the economy and a whole lot of other issues. I'm not sure how you get around that. What can be done to prevent that. I even, way back in '99 with EverQuest, I mean, I had 2 accounts, right? I had my primary account that I would go raid with, that was my higher level character. And then for fun, when I was by myself, maybe the guild wasn't on, or, I tend to do West Coast sort of things. I'm more East Coast. So that was especially during college days, which, my parents don't watch this. So I'll say, when I would play EverQuest during, first year of college, people just weren't on. So I would have a second account. Now that was a second computer, so I was running 2 keyboards, 2 mice, so I had to be in control of both characters. But I don't know how you can go about sort of.
I think it really comes down to making the complex gameplay the thing that prevents people from just sitting there. It's one of the things with WoW and a lot of MMOs is that they suffer from the fact that you're basically setting up in front of an enemy and then you're just falling asleep. And there might be a point where you have to jump or do some patterned thing once or twice, but it's not very complex. I remember one of the former EQ streamers would frequently talk about how they would just fall asleep tanking, like literally sleeping while tanking in World of Warcraft raids. So I think that's the opposite. I think of something like Defiance or even DCUO. You can't fall asleep in that game. You're constantly moving. You're constantly like using active defense and such. You're not able to just sit there and fall asleep. And I think that's more what I think the game should actually be doing here. Is that, there's a hot bar, there's auto attack, there's going to be some conventional things that we're aware of and familiar with, but that shouldn't be the majority of gameplay. The majority of gameplay should be moving and positioning and, playing smart and actually having to pay attention to your surroundings rather than, just don't do more damage than the main tank is drawing aggro, and don't draw aggro from the ads either because we're CCing them. Like that's not compelling gameplay, and we shouldn't accept that as compelling gameplay whatsoever. You should have to move, you have to dodge, you have to jump, you have to reposition, you have to, acknowledge the fact that this thing just spewed lava where you're standing and you can't just stand there anymore. That's the sort of stuff that's going to keep you from multiboxing. Also, harvesting, if you're not just sitting there going dink, 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 but you actually have like a timing game that you're trying to do, or you have to aim something, or I want to say Revival was going to be almost like a minesweeper sort of thing. That's an active process. You can't just hand that over to a bot. You can't just, automate that if you actually have to. Obviously there are some ways you probably could to some extent, but I think those are the ways that you're pinging the server, pinging the thing in such a way that it creates a sort of thing where they're able to detect that the computer's doing something weird. But that's all for the security people to figure out, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's part of the beauty of having action combat. Like you're adjusting to stuff on the fly. So having a hybrid means you have some action combat. So that should be different than just macroing tab target. I'm hoping so. I'm of the mind too that it should be okay as long as you're not using macros and bots, and you have to actually input on each character. But I'm also, one of the things that I heard, it might not be related, but it comes to my mind as we talk about it, is paying attention to what skills other people are using and having that, like this person just used a flame sword and caught that person on fire. So that means I get to use my ability that takes advantage of people who are on fire. All that kind of stuff that's kind of happening in real time. I'm hoping that will also add some complexity. But one of the things that I've been really looking forward to with MMORPGs that I haven't experienced yet is that EQ2 tried to do somewhat, but didn't work well, is playing off of each other's abilities and learning how each person likes to play, and taking advantage of that and thinking through that versus cookie cutter. You're supposed to use this form of fireball. Everybody knows that. Paying attention to augments that other people are using. Hopefully that will make it something where it's more difficult to multi-box because you want to pay attention to what your teammates are doing. I guess if you can really work it out so that you are all of your teammates, maybe you don't have to think so hard. But yeah, we'll see.
I guess to me, it will just basically come down to what is the purpose of dual, having multiple accounts. If someone's purpose is to go grab a legendary world boss, one, I don't think that will be possible. Well, I guess it could. You're going to be spending a hell of a lot of money in monthly subscriptions, but that I think, again, is a problem. If it's someone who's just sort of out running around, otherwise would be soloing, maybe getting some resources, I think that's fine to have a second account that you're managing, as long as you're actually managing it.
Where I think multi-boxing isn't, I'm not sure if it isn't as big of a problem or it might even be a bigger problem, is potentially in the space of crafting. The idea that you do actually have the ability to make everything yourself instead of one character not being able to be the top harvester, the top, resource refiner, and then the top producer of products. And so being able to just have their own crafting pipeline and infrastructure, I would imagine, is something that would be very advantageous. Even more so, I kind of worry that somebody who's doing that would maybe recruit a couple buddies and they have like 5 characters that 3 people are just running 24/7. That's definitely going to give a small group a huge advantage. And if you multiply that force factor by like a large guild and you've got 100 people doing that sort of thing, that's, world-changing level of economic power that they've just got in their hands, just constantly running.
Well, but we wouldn't need to multi-box that typically. So where we would need to multi-box that is if we needed multiple characters crafting something at the exact same time. Typically, we don't encounter that in MMORPGs, but one of the questions I have had about crafting is similar to multiple necromancers casting a spell, or multiple mages crafting a golem, summoning a golem. Will there be stuff like that for crafting where we have to have multiple characters working on something at the same time and you get
I sure hope
kind
so.
of aggregate effect?
I sure hope so.
Cool.
I feel like we don't know enough yet about the system necessarily to kind of make a decision on that. That was a thought that I also had, Neuro. If you do have 2 or 3 accounts, how easy will it be to do that? Create your own chain, more or less. I think the bigger concern will be.
What do you mean by chain?
Supply chain.
Yeah.
But why do you need multiple accounts to do that?
So instead of spending 4 hours harvesting and 4 hours breaking down those materials and then 4 hours crafting them and then maybe an hour getting them to a market, you've just got 3 characters that are running that are doing all of those processes in tandem. So
Yeah.
now you're across 12 hours, you've done the process 3 times instead of 1 time.
Well, and
I
also
don't think
the
you
deep.
can multi-box
I mean, also
because you can't do all that stuff in the same space.
Well, also, I think in my head, it's more when you start getting more specialized into certain areas. If you're able to run 2 or 3 of your own characters, that, again, this is where I guess we just don't know enough yet to make a judgment. But presumably, obviously, if I am a farmer, I could potentially even be like super specialized within farming of some sort. So not even just all crops, but specific types. You know, would it be beneficial to have a second character that can fill in what now I can't? It's
But
more
that's
so specializing.
character, not account.
Well, I guess you have a point. You have a point there. I mean, I could still see. I see what you mean now. As far as you're not necessarily processing everything at the same. You're not going out and harvesting at the same time. Again, that we just don't know too. Is crafting going to be like you have a 20-minute timer on certain things? Because then you could. Then yeah. Well, okay. I'm waiting 20 minutes on this. I'm going to take my other character and go do something else. But the other concern is freeholds, right? So obviously we know land will be a premium of some sorts. I don't know how much it'll be like Arc-Age, but there will not be, unlimited amounts. And I think at some point way back, even Stephen had talked a little bit about, could you be a realtor in the game more or less, right? Buying and selling land. And yeah, that could potentially be a viable gameplay option. So we know that land's going to be important. So, who's to stop me from having 3 accounts and I get 3 freeholds all right next to each other in a prime spot or something like that. So I think there's just still a lot we don't know about. And so when we don't know things, people immediately, a large amount of people immediately, it's a bad thing. Multi-boxing, that's antisocial. You're not wanting to play with others. This is an MMO. You're supposed to play with others. You're going to ruin the economy.
I just think of it again, going back to the analogy of D&D, the idea of like multi-boxing characters. Like I have never gone into a D&D campaign being like, okay, I'm going to be a Hexblade Centaur and I'm going to be an SMR cleric, and those are my 2 badasses, and they're going to perfectly synergize. Like, every DM's going to look at me like, you're full of shit. Get out of here. Like, unless they specifically said roll 2 of the most badass characters and one of them's gonna die. All right, cool.